We're live with Jeff, Amber,
Hey.
and Morgan. And we're going to be going through... and over to Jeff to tell us about this episode whilst I put the montage on.
That's good. I'm glad you worked whilst into the actual recorded video. This is Homicide, Life on the Street, Season 6, Episode 19, Strangled, Not Stirred, written by Linda McGibney, Julie Martin, and Anya Epstein. So a trio of ladies. And directed by Jay Tobias. Originally aired April 10th, 1998. And I don't have a David B226 Morris review for this one, so I'm going to read a couple of short summaries, and then I guess we'll get into anything else that we want to talk about. So, thoughts first, I guess, and go from there. So the Wikipedia summary says, Ballard and Gardy investigate the death of a young single woman who was found shocked with a stun gun and strangled with her own pantyhose. A second such victim is soon found, leading the pair to a husband and wife who accuse each other of not just these two murders, but 3 more in other cities. A spate of anonymous tips on the Mahoney-related cases allows the detectives to close all of them. Falzone realizes that the information in those tips had to have come from Lewis, who learns from G that Barnfather is trying to get him transferred out of Homicide and CID. And the TV.com summary just says, Ballard and Gardy investigate the deaths of 2 single women who were bought drinks by a married couple. The victims were stunned and then strangled. The other detectives receive detailed information that helps them close the open Mahoney drug shootings. Their helpful informant turns out to be Lewis, who has a hearing coming up. Ballard and Gardy get their suspect in the box, and he claims to be the one to stun the victims, but his wife actually did the strangulation. Ballard is skeptical about the woman's involvement, but the evidence points to the couple. So, yeah, basically Gardy's the one that pushes, well, use the lie of saying where the hair was, and maybe she'll confess, and she did. So, anyway, what have you to say about this one?
Right. My main thought about this episode is that the twist was okay. I just have a slight issue with the way the actress played it. In that, if you watched it again, you couldn't necessarily say, "Oh, she was playing it where she had something to hide," like that. It's only a slight quibble, I suppose, in the performance, but it just sort of seemed to come out of nowhere in terms of her performance. I don't know. What did you think about that, Jeff?
I mean, I thought the couple in general, and I don't know how much is the fault of the actors and how much is the director, but they seemed a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, phony, just kind of a little bit Hollywoodish instead of more realistic, like we've usually talked about the casting is on this show.
Yeah.
Enough to bother me where I couldn't enjoy the episode, but it was kind of like they're spending a lot of time on this couple that really aren't that interesting, and the acting is not as good as the usual Homicide level. So
yeah,
that was kind of my favorite.
He was sort of like the kind of acting you would get in those cheesy erotic thrillers with Shannon Worry in the 1990s.
Yeah, that's kind of what I felt like too, that this could have been, if this was on HBO, it would have gone in a different direction, but, but as it was on NBC, they could only just have little them, and it just wasn't, it was kind of out of place seeming, but again, not bad, just it wasn't enough to make me go, oh, this is cringeworthy or anything. It just made me, not quite be as into it as I might have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think
given better performance.
I think given the twist, that a really good actor and actress would have really set it up well, and upon watching it a second time, you could see that there was little subtext in there, in their interactions and things earlier on.
Yeah, and it's tough on the actors because that's not easy to do in a show like this. That's established show with an ensemble cast, and you're being asked to establish these characters in this amount of time, that's not an easy task. So, you know, I can't really say that they did that bad a job. It's just that was difficult to do. Maybe more of a bad choice in the story in trying to do that. But, you know, hey, they tried.
Right. Okay. So another thing is, was this the first mention of the internet? And he was like, it was Garty who mentioned the internet when he was talking about buying stun guns on the internet. Is this the first time the internet's been mentioned in the show?
No, definitely not the first time. In fact, I know Munch has mentioned it at least a couple of times. And so, yeah, it's...
They might have called it the information superhighway or something.
It's gotten a few mentions before at this point.
My memory, eh? Terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Jelko Ivanek. Yeah, got a Danvers appearance in this episode.
Yep.
Haven't seen it.
Yeah, we had him stood next to G. And you saw how that G was a whole head taller than him. Right. So
Linda McGibney was she wrote a previous episode that wasn't as good either, and now I can't remember which one it was. But I remember us noting at the time that her writing was a little bit different than the typical Homicide. But they brought her back.
Well, this is where
to do that again.
The story editor or script editor should come in.
Yeah, I agree.
But, you know, they have got 22 episodes to get through, and when you get towards, you know, the middle of the sort of like, was it the middle of the sort of like the last third of the season before the climax, the writers are sort of like getting a bit tired out, and they want to end with a climax. And
yeah,
you get that sag phase when you have so many episodes.
Well, this is a season that definitely ends with a climax, that's for sure.
Yeah. Ooh.
We haven't gotten there yet, but there's definitely some action at the end of the season.
I think one thing they did well was the theme that Ballard is not some kind of super cop, where they still have this thing where you have Garty like helping her out and stuff. So I just wonder if, like, so is she meant to like come from Seattle? And it's like, I wonder if any like cops are in Seattle and probably watching this, thinking they're making us look really bad, like we're like really minor league compared to Baltimore.
Probably less in this episode as they did in the as they would in the one where she was acting like
City Goat one.
City Goat. Yeah, because Gardy's like introducing her to
poor people,
hillbillies and stuff, and it's like she acts like she's never seen anything like this before. Like, you know, Seattle, yeah, it's going to be different kinds of people than Baltimore, but it's not like there's not any rural people in Washington, in the state of Washington, or you know, homeless people in Seattle and stuff like that. So it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
That one was a little bit more like people might say, "Hey, wait a minute, what about Seattle?"
Yeah, it might have been like
this one. She basically was just saying that she wanted to see more of the world because she'd been there her whole life. So it wasn't really you know, I don't think it really made Seattle look bad or anything. Yeah.
Do you think maybe the writers had sort of like taken in the cliches of Seattle, sort of like based on like Frasier or something?
There may be
something
a little
like
East Coast bias in the writing. In this, yeah.
Right. Whatever. So I thought that was quite good in that she's not sort of like this super cop who like finds everything so easy. But, I mean, arguably it undercut the character, but you know, that's the subjective.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's been pretty realistically portrayed from the beginning. They had that first part in her first episode where they said, you know, she had solved this big case or whatever. They kind of portrayed that, but even I would say she's been less portrayed that way than even Howard was. Because remember, they had the thing with Howard where she had this streak of solving cases.
Yeah, she was the super cop.
Yeah, she didn't have any unsolved cases, and they don't have that with Ballard. In fact, when they showed the board, she had more than one name in red under her name. So
Yeah, she was. Yep, she was the super cop who worked harder than the other ones and beat Munch in the exam, and Munch didn't actually go for the captain's exam. I think.
yeah,
Yeah, you could say.
yeah, and that was
Yeah,
it's kind of, in the book they talked about how there was one female in the homicide department, and she really kind of had that attitude, like I've got to really impress, or else I'm not going to stay around, because their expectations are, oh, there's a woman in the department, she doesn't really belong here, and she had to prove herself that she did.
one thing I would say from like a plot point of view is like the criminals are not that smart in that paying for drinks with credit cards. I mean,
Yeah, well,
it can be chased.
yeah, well, the point, that was kind of the point, was that they were never portrayed as being that smart. They were, they were more thrill killers, as I said. Like, we had the guy, in the one episode earlier that was driving around and killing people, and they were pretty much the same. They just hadn't, they weren't making a constant cross-country trip. They made one cross-country trip or whatever, but still, it was similar in that they were not criminal masterminds. They were thrill killers. They wasn't like they sat down and came up with a huge plan on how they were going to do this. They just decided that it was exciting and did it.
Yeah.
So,
and we had a little bit
away with it.
We had a little bit of We had a little bit of continuing stuff with maybe a relationship developing between Falzone and Ballard towards the end.
And they had a good scene where G's talking to Lewis and doesn't even ask him if he's responsible for the tips. Lets him know that he knows.
Yes.
Just says it ends here.
Yeah, or then he just, I think
the feeling there is, even if he was wrong, it doesn't do any harm to say that anyway. So he's basically making it clear, if you are the guy, then, stop it. So again, it's very typical G that he's confident in saying that he's not going to him to ask him what he's doing. He's telling him, stop doing that.
Well, in all likelihood, he's seen it all before. When you have that much experience.
Yeah, something similar, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll find out next week if Lewis, in fact, makes it back to Homicide.
Hopefully he does. I don't know if anything else to say about this episode. Do you think there was anything type related worth talking about in it, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that the killers, were probably SP types, in terms of, the way they were portrayed as, they decided they got a kick out of doing this love killing or whatever. So yeah. Probably SFPs. And the jealous wife is like, he killed without me, so I'm going to turn him in. Yeah. Definitely could have been soap opera characters for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, he was rather. I did get a feeling that this is one of these plots that they did for the ratings.
Yeah. And also wonder how much was cut by the censors. Because it probably was that too.
Yeah.
A little more insight to Ballard's personality, but I still don't, at this point, have enough to really come up with a type for her. So I guess you could say there's some good things about that in terms of, if she's doesn't come off as a stereotype. So
I suppose there was a section like with Garty where she maybe showed a feeling preference.
Yeah.
That bit where it was like she was, or maybe that was just something else. Like, that scene where she was so sure that it was the guy that did it alone. And, Garty was saying, you got to check this out just to be sure.
Right. There was some righteous indignation there.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I guess she did seem a little similar to Pendleton, because he's had those moments himself, where his rationality was overcome by his kind of emotional reaction to something.
But again, that could just be like maturity thing of like you got Garty, who might be like 20 years older than her at least, because he's in his 50s.
Because I think Garty's a feeler too. I think he's an ISFJ, so his stuff is very influenced by his, you know, his type of feeling though is very, again, it's similar to Bayless. He just kind of takes it in a different direction where he sort of has his take on this is the way the world is, and everything goes through that filter. You know, it sort of reinforces like what they call a confirmation bias. It's like everything Garty sees, it like it goes through his. This is the way I see things, so it's just more evidence that I'm right about the way the world is kind of attitude.
Yeah, they're filters.
And of course, you know, like I said, G, you know, exemplifies ESTJ, and you know, once again, and like I said in the scene with Lewis, where he just confidently tells him, you know, this is he drops those things about this is what the bosses want. He doesn't come out and say, well, I want you to work for me again, but you can tell that is kind of what he's saying, but he's not going to come out and say it that way because he doesn't want to sound like, you know, there's a personal stake in it for him. And then says, you know, that the tipping, you know, this ends here, you know. So it's like, again, he's asserting his authority while at the same time sort of dropping hints that, you know, he does want Lewis back, but he's not going to come out and say that.
Could that also be a generational thing where, like, say he was a younger ESTJ, and where it's like, because men do tend to show more emotion now than maybe than that older generation. Could that play into it? That the G character's an older generation, so it would be even harder for him to show emotion.
And he's also got, as we've talked about before, there's a racial aspect in the sense that he's always aware of that, and a part of him probably says, you know, I want for a black detective to be successful, you know, and not have this problem happening. I want him to be back in the squad and being an asset to the department. That probably factors in as well.
Yeah, I would have liked a little bit more on that. A little bit. You know, it's always good to have more G scenes.
Yeah, we probably, the episode probably would have been better overall if there'd been, you know, more of that and a little bit less of the couple that isn't really that interesting.
Yeah. Just say, overall, would you like to even maybe another plot put in there? Because you like it when there's multiple plots.
Yeah, a little bit more time focused on stuff. Like, to me, it's like, you know, I think of even last week's episode, and especially Shaggy Dog City Goat, as being good examples of, like, you know, being able to work in a lot of different stuff in the same episode and still have everything paced well and not feel like, you know, there's something that's being ignored at its time, and it fit well together. In this one, it's kind of like just not bad, just a little bit less good at that. It was kind of had that feeling like it was just not quite up to that level.
Yeah, I mean this episode was pretty much like your average American crime drama in the 1990s. You know, good, but not Homicide level.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly that I would agree with that, but that's because I just don't know what I would consider to be the average crime drama in the 1990s, so it's hard for me to use that scale. I can say that this episode was not as good as an average Homicide episode for sure, and probably not as good as an average NYPD Blue episode, but it was better than the below average NYPD Blue episodes. So, you know, that I can judge by because I watched that show.
I think it comes back to the casting of the two guest, you know, co-criminals, where a lot of it rests on that.
Yeah,
I think about how you take this episode. I mean, if you'd have had if you'd have had like a real top line guest actor and actress, like then it could have been like a standout episode.
Yeah, that's the kind of feeling I have. Is this like this was an enjoyable piece of television, but you could have done better? Is kind of the feeling I have. You know, in several ways, but.
And we're sort of like
This episode, I kind of have a feeling in a way too, but it's like, it's better of it that bother me. So it's kind of like, it's both better and worse in different areas. So,
ooh.
yeah. But I guess what would your rating be for this one?
Oh, I'll give it about 7 out of 10. Because we did sort of like get something different in that we concentrated on Ballard, sort of new character, rather than going through the old ones.
I agree. I'd give it a 7 also, which is my rating system. 7 tends to be almost a default for a show that's good. It's like if it's a good show, but it's not a standout episode of that good show, it tends to end up getting a 7 for me. So yeah, I'd agree. So obviously that's an average of 7. There's an episode called Secrets that's written by Yaphet Kotto, which is his second episode written for him in the series. So
yeah, and actually, I think the first one he did was quite good as well. I think he used his personal experience.
Just to make my bold prediction, I'm going to say you might actually enjoy this one slightly more than I do. So we'll put it that way. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
Well then, so it's good night from me. Good night from Amber. Good night from Jeff. Bye-bye, folks.